Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm representing Three Lakes Resources. And we are an independent exploration company focused on shale gas, essentially in Poland. We've got a significant position in Poland, which we've been working on now for the last 4 years. And I'll tell you a bit about our experiences in progressing our understanding of the geology in Poland. I think it's fair to say we were the first company to come to Poland with a view to licensing shale in Poland, shale acreage. And this map illustrates that quite nicely. If you look at the left-hand map there, April 2008, those 6 brown blocks ringed on the left-hand map there are the 6 blocks we had acquired in late 07 and early 08 with a view to exploring for shale gas. You scroll forward 2 and a bit years to late 2010, and you can see that the whole trend, that this trend here has all now been licensed up, and that is 3 basins. That's the Baltic Basin, the Podlasie Basin is the middle one around here, and the Lublin Basin down here. They've all been licensed up principally by foreign companies with a view to investigating shale gas in Poland. But as you can see, and stopping on the Baltic Basin in particular, the first blocks to go after our brown blocks there were the ones immediate to the south, and the next blocks to go after that were the ones further to the south again. So you can see there was a lot of interest in the Baltic Basin, and particularly in the northern part of the Baltic Basin where we are. So this is a map of our blocks in a bit more detail. 6 blocks we hold just on the coast of the Baltic Sea there, totaling about 1 million acres in all. Our partner is ConocoPhillips, which farmed initially financed a program of exploration across all 6 blocks, and last year exercised a call option to take up a 70% interest in the 3 western blocks. So Conoco now has a 70% interest in these 3 blocks here. We retain a 30% interest, and these 3 blocks we hold 100%. Over the 4 years since 2009, we've been engaged in quite an active exploration program. Since then, we've acquired 3 seismic shoots, 3 3D seismic shoots, which are these here, 1, 2, 3, totaling 225 square kilometers in all. We've drilled 2 vertical wells, which were drilled in 2010 and early 2011, which were very much science, exploratory wells. We took extensive core out of those wells. And this is the Lebien LE1 and the Wengovo 1 well, that's the Lebien well there, and the Lengovo well down there. Very much science wells. We took extensive cores and logs from the wells. We did flare gas from the vertical Lebien well in late 2010. And in 2011, we drilled 2 horizontal wells over on the western side, and I'll explain a bit more detail our thinking here. But the Lebien LE2 well on the same location as the LE1, and then we drilled the Warblino well, which is over here on the most westerly block. Last year we drilled one further. We tested those 2 vertical wells in 2011. Last year we drilled a further vertical well, which is the Stresivo well, which is to the north of the Lebien well up here. And this is the area we're focusing on up here, as I'll explain shortly. So what drives our drilling strategy? We're focusing on the wet gas, dry gas area of our acreage. This map is a maturity map showing the hydrocarbon maturity across the area of our 6 blocks. You can see on the eastern side it's oil prone, and these blocks are largely oil and wet gas prone. As you move west, the target formations get much deeper and hence more mature. And so over here you're on the wet gas window here, and then as we go further south and west we get into the dry gas window. And our area of interest is this northern part of our western blocks, which are on the wet gas, dry gas dividing line, and we believe that's the most prospective area for prioritizing exploration at this stage. for two reasons, really. One is the maturity. We want to really prioritize dry gas, possibly with a little bit of liquids, because this is still an unproven play at this stage, and it makes sense to try and move the dry gas molecules first. And secondly, because as you get north, it's much shallower here. The target formations, being the Ordovician and the Cambrian, come up closer to the surface as you come north and east. So it's clearly drilling costs are cheaper, the target is more accessible, and the formation thickness improves. There's been a fair amount of activity across the basin. About 24 wells drilled since 2009. I mean, since 2010. Clearly, I mean, I think the ones that are of most interest for us are clearly the ones up in or close to our high-graded area up here. But we have nevertheless engaged in extensive data trading with a number of other operators in the basin. Essentially, that allows us to validate our geological model and really confirm what was already understood about the Baltic Basin, which is that as you move south and west and you approach this dividing line here, the target formations get much deeper, and eventually you reach a very large fault zone here called the Trans-European Suture Zone, where it really becomes very deep indeed. Over on the eastern side here, you've got a granite high called the Missouri-Belarus High, and the shales rise and pinch out on the edge of the high there. We've put in this slide because we think it's helpful not to lose sight of the way in which shale plays have evolved in the US, and we've taken here the Fayetteville as an analog to illustrate the fact that initial rates are not necessarily the rates you can achieve after several years of improving your understanding of a shale play. And this data is taken from Southwestern Energy's experience in the Fayetteville. And the graph on the left illustrates the improvements in initial rates they were able to get over a 5-year period. So in this bottom line here illustrates average initial rates in their first year of drilling in the Fayetteville, and they're getting around a million cubic foot a day average rates. Then as you move forward, as they improve their understanding of the Fayetteville and clearly changes in drilling techniques and drilling completion techniques as well, they're able to achieve significant improvements in initial rates, with the result that by 2011 they were getting rates of up to 2.5 million, average rates of 2.5 million cubic foot a day. So a 2.5-fold improvement in productivity there. Same thing with estimated ultimate recoveries. It's shown in the graph on the right. Initial recoveries of around 700 million cubic foot a well in 2007, and they were able to improve that to 5 BCF per well by 2011. So a very encouraging precedent for what one can aim for with a European shale play. I mentioned we drilled 2 horizontal wells, and these have been really the key test of the potential, the commercial potential of our acreage to date. These were both drilled in 2011 on the back of the data gained from the 2 vertical wells. The first one was the Lebien well, the Lebien LE2H, which was targeting our primary target in our blocks, which is the Ordovician shale. And it had a 1,000-meter horizontal section. We fracked it initially in 2011. We produced gas, but not as much as I think probably the market had hoped for. But we did flow gas with assistance at about a rate of about 500,000 cubic foot a day for about an 8-day period. We then shut the well in, and in 2012, after the well had been shut in for about a 9-month period, we reopened it and flowed it again. At this stage, it flowed unassisted, so a big improvement. The rate itself was slightly better than we got last year, but the main difference was that this was now an unassisted rate, and we flowed it for a 21-day natural flow test with a rate of just over 500,000 cubic foot a day. That rate in itself is not a commercial rate. We need to achieve further improvements on that, but even, for example, lengthening the lateral section would obviously give you significant improvements in flow rate. there are a number of areas which we're working on to improve the flow rate potential of wells such as the Webian 2H well. The second horizontal well we drilled was the Warblino well out on our most western block. This was targeting a deeper section, being the Cambrian alum shale, which was largely unknown to us on our blocks. We knew it existed, but we'd not had any opportunity to core it on our previous vertical wells. But it's a well-known shale in the area, so it was clearly a target that needed to be investigated. We drilled that with a rather shorter vertical section and did test it, but got really quite a modest rate. I mean, a disappointing rate out of it. Tested for 5 days in 2011, and we got there 18,000 cubic foot a day. Our understanding is that, or what we believe is the case, is that there was some kind of drilling or completion issues with the well. We don't think we've fully explored the potential of the Cambrian alum shale. We have every reason to believe it's a highly prospective shale, and something needs to be done differently there. We did test the well again last year. We were able to achieve an improvement in the flow rate, but still only to 90,000 cubic foot a day, so not in itself something that's going to, we clearly need to work on it to improve that significantly. Late last year, as I indicated, ConocoPhillips, on the back of the results of the 2 vertical wells and the 2 horizontal wells on these 3 western blocks, exercised its option to take over a controlling interest and operatorship of the wells. Operatorship was transferred to Conoco in September last year. And since then, we've drilled 1 further well under Conoco's operatorship, which is the Stresivo well up here. We've also carried out further testing of the Webian LE1H and the Warblino wells, as I indicated. Our focus of activity now is very much this high-graded area up here, where we believe the shales are of sufficiently shallow and of sufficient thickness, as well as being of the right maturity to warrant further investigation. And that's really the area which we're pursuing now. We've carried out extensive core analysis on the 2 vertical wells we drilled in 2010, and also more recently the Stresivo well, which we drilled last year. That's enabled us also to significantly improve our understanding of the Cambrian alum shale, which is the deeper target I mentioned. And so we're now feeling that this is also a target that deserves a lot of additional attention, and is potentially maybe a target for field development on its own. And really the way we're progressing our evaluation of the shales now is that either the Ordovician or the Cambrian shales could be sufficient, suitable, independent exploration targets on their own. So our plan, looking forward now, we plan to continue testing the Stresivo well, which we drilled last year, and that is a combination. That's a vertical well, drilled all the way through to the Cambrian section, and we will test both the deeper and the shallower zones. That's to say, both the alum shale and the Ordovician shale in that section. And that testing will involve first a defit, and then a frac, and then a flow test of the alum shale, and then we'll come up the wellbore, and we'll do the same thing in the Ordovician section. We're also planning 2 further wells for this year. Both will be vertical wells, very much science wells, similar to the Stresivo well, and they will be within our high-graded area indicated on this slide here. And we will test those wells in a similar fashion to the Stresivo well. That's to say, vertical well to the bottom of the lower target formation, defit frac on the lower formation, and then come up and do a defit and frac and test on the shallower formation as well. We have the option to drill an additional horizontal well later this year or early next year, which is indicated at the bottom of this graph here of this table. So essentially, further improving our understanding of our high-graded area. All of the vertical wells we're drilling will have the option to go horizontal at a later date, but we are at the moment focusing very much on the science and trying to understand the rock properties before we drill any further horizontal sections. So where do we go from here? Our drilling program since 2010 has allowed us to update our geological model, and we believe it confirms our initial assessment when we selected these blocks that we're in a prime part of the Baltic Basin. We've also been able to high-grade part of our acreage and come up with a high-graded area which we believe represents a lower risk area for exploration than it did at the time of our initial public offering in 2011. We've drilled 5 wells to date. So 3 verticals, 2 horizontals. We're planning 2 further wells this year, and possibly a 3rd well as well, taking us up to 8 wells drilled on our blocks. And our current, even after fulfillment of that current work program, we remain well financed to progress our program after that. And lastly, we are working with ConocoPhillips to a decision point in 2014, which will be a decision on drilling 1 or more lateral sections to these vertical wells, with a view to flowing lateral sections again, and potentially after that taking a decision on a pilot development program. So we might be looking at a decision on a pilot development program perhaps end of 2014, and then pilot program for the next 2 years after that. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
So, do we have any questions for Alex?
Hi, it was when I sat down microbial control. I was just wondering, I mean, you've been there for a few years and you've seen some success. How has government perception and public perception in Poland changed in the time you've been there? And do you think that could be translated across to the UK if we followed a similar trajectory?
I would say that government's very supportive of developing its oil and gas sector, has been for a long time. And they've become very big believers in the potential of shale in Poland. I think that they, at the moment, and I'd say on top of that, at a local level, you've got a huge amount of support. We have excellent relationships with local communities, with the local authorities, and indeed with the villages where we drill and so on. A very, very good relationship. I think Poland, as was mentioned this morning, is a country which is fiercely independent and very keen to develop domestic energy resources as part of its energy independence, energy security policy. So we're finding a very good reception at a local level amongst communities, with local authority leaders, and also in the government in terms of a desire to see a domestic shale gas sector develop. I think perhaps where things have almost gone a little bit too far in Poland is that there's been such a lot of excitement about the potential of shale that it's started to generate a bit of a, if you like, a slightly populist backlash again, where people say, well, look, there's all this shale potential here, maybe we shouldn't be letting the foreigners have so much of it, maybe the tax rate should go up, for example. And that's really where the debate's got to the moment. There's quite a lot of quite a lively debate going on at the moment in Poland about the future regulation and taxation of the sector. And the government has put out proposals which are now revising in the face of strong opposition from the industry. And the message that the industry has gone back to them with is that it's no point putting a heavy tax rate on an industry that's not yet established itself. We need to demonstrate commerciality before you can look at what sort of tax burden it can bear. So that's really where the debate's got to at the moment in Poland. I think, on the other hand, I think both Poland and the UK have a common interest in energy security, in promoting domestic energy resources. That's very clear. And if you look, for example, at what happens in Europe, in Brussels, there is clearly a very good understanding between our representatives of both countries in terms of promoting shale as a resource for the benefits it can bring to both countries.
Any other questions, Graham?
Thank you, Graham Dean with Reach. Poland's I'm over here. Poland's often been dismissed as it's been dismissed by some for having low organic content in the shales. Is that correct? What is the TOC?
The organic carbon can be very high. It depends where you are. I mean, it can be up to 10% or more. The alum shale itself is well known to be a very, very rich shale across a large part of that part of Europe, northern Poland, Estonia. Likewise, the Ordovician, it's got some parts of it that are very rich.
Hi, Mark Linder, Quadrilla. I see your AIM listed. So what are the pros and cons of being public in such a venture as yours?
Obviously, access to capital is a big pro, and it enables you to raise a large amount of capital in a short period of time in a very well-defined manner. I think if you look at the alternatives, which would be private equity, for example, there are pros and cons of both routes. We chose to go down the public route at the time. I think the constraint that you have as a public company is that then you do have to worry about your share price, obviously, and that's something which a private company such as Quadrilla at the moment you have the luxury of avoiding that issue.
This question, I think, very close.
Yeah. Corin Taylor from the Institute of Directors. What sort of issues have you had around a supply chain in Poland? Obviously, you're at an exploration phase, but is there much of a potential to build up a local supply chain there and use local companies as well as, obviously, international expertise?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked a lot with local supply companies. Picnic has a big service division, which we worked a lot with and still do. There's also increasing interest from foreign companies coming in. You've got Czech and Canadian, North American drilling companies coming in, German drilling companies, and obviously the big names, Schlumberger and Halliburton are present as well. I think that there is a very technically well-educated local resource in Poland because they have a long-standing tradition of oil and gas exploration production. They do have a good knowledge base there. At the moment, it's probably quite a lot of it is taken up by the state oil and gas company, and I think as the state oil and gas company withdraws from the service sector, which it seems to be in the process of doing, you should see a further development of that sector domestically. You're also seeing some other foreign investors coming in and setting up locally based companies, which is encouraging too.